Right
You
on,
got
dude.
it.
Let's fire it up. Cool. Well, dude, thanks so much for coming and hanging out, taking some time,
Absolutely.
chilling, talking guitar.
Yeah,
It's been a pleasure.
man.
I've been just feeling worn out, dude. Been doing too many
Oh,
outside gigs for like 3 hours. And it's like those are like the only gigs I could find really recently. And I played like 3 or 4 last week, and you know, it's like 100 degrees or some shit. I'm just like roasting, and
man.
but dude,
That's
it's been fun. Not talking shit, but like it's tiring. You're just like outside in the heat, and so I just been like trying to recoup, and that's its own battle. I feel like just like being out of whatever the schedule of just doing it so often, and now I do like a short little stint and I feel like really tired. But
man.
dude, it's been really cool. Yeah, I just got this bad boy,
Oh, beautiful.
and I don't know, this camera's kind of shitty, but it's a Regal. But
Regal. I'm not familiar with it, but it looks
I don't know
fantastic.
how it sounds. I got it in C.
Yeah, sounds like C. Oh man, fantastic.
And this is I've been asking like every jazz dude I know, like, do you know any slide jazz guitar players? Does that ring any bells for you?
Not really. No, that's a
Neither.
good question. And
Me
I
neither.
think that you might have cornered a market if you
Yeah,
jumped
yeah.
into
That's what
that.
I mean, dude, I've been asking like university department heads and like, jazz historians, and everyone's like, that's nothing I've really heard of before. So I've heard of like a
No.
few people, but it's like, in comparison to the number of jazz guitar players, there's like one or two, even like pedal steel, that would be super sweet, but that's like a beast of its own.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of Dave Easley, who played on the Brian Blade Fellowship
Hmm.
first two albums, and but I wouldn't call him strictly jazz. You know, he sort of
Yeah, right
had
on.
this improvisational language on, I think, the pedal steel guitar that was
Hmm.
just, man, it's kind of like the only way I can describe it personally, and I mean this in the best possible way, is kind of outrageous. You know, like it's just
Totally.
Dave Easley on those records, the first two Brian Blade records, playing pedal steel. I mean, it's just some of the most incredible playing of a stringed instrument that I've ever heard. So, you know,
Cool.
and it's sort of within a somewhat jazz context. So
Which record is that?
that is the self-titled Brian Blade Fellowship album from 1997
Okay.
and
I'm writing it down.
Perceptual from 99. And both of which are just fantastic records, and Perceptual is probably my favorite. But
Hmm.
man, you play a slide jazz guitar? No, I haven't heard that, but man, why not? I
I'm
love the
trying,
idea.
man. I'm trying. It's I haven't really like gone as far as like posting or recording like standards or something like
Mhm.
that. But
Yeah,
anytime I play any gig for like the last year, I've been playing slide, and it's hard
really.
work, dude. I don't know. It's I thought it would be cool. And I remember doing it on like an instrumental EP. I'm like, whoa, this is a really wild sound. And then I tried like not doing it in a recording situation, and
Mm.
taking away one of your fingers is like kind of a big deal. And
Yeah.
it's been really fun though, like that. I don't know, I've just been kind of like burned on whatever I was doing before. I don't know, just like feeling uninspired. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you know like Blake Mills, but he's like the guy that really turned me on to it. And I was like, oh,
Right.
this could be cool and not used in like the most traditional way. And then like the snarky stuff, I guess that's probably like another more modern reference.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Great reference.
I was talking to Bob or Chris, I can't remember which one. They both been on the podcast, but they were saying that that's Michael League. He's just like, yeah, I want this guitar part to have slide. It wasn't like them saying that I'm going to play slide and you're going to do whatever. So that's kind of interesting, where it's like just like a sound or a texture that he was hearing specifically.
Man, Bob
Um,
is such a great guitar player. I
he's
actually,
wild.
I haven't seen Bob in a long time. I
Hmm.
did one or two double guitar gigs with Bob Lanzetti
Oh,
in
super cool.
Brooklyn
Whoa.
with a band called that you may or may not know called Progger.
Okay, I'm familiar.
Yeah, Brian Donahoe, great saxophone player, multi-instrumentalist. I believe he lives in Austin now, but he lived in New
Sick.
York for a long, long time. And I used to sort of play some of those prog gigs. And one of the gigs was myself and Bob Lanzetti. And man, that was so much fun.
Yeah, that
That
was
was
probably
great.
really wild. You guys are like really opposite guitar people. Not in like a a diss way or something like that,
No,
but
I love that.
you're
I
very
love
different.
people. Yes, I love people who don't play like me. I can barely stand to listen to myself as it is. So I like to listen to people who sound completely different.
Dude, that was, I mean, on that topic, that was one of the reasons why I wanted you on here. Is I don't know anybody that sounds like you.
Oh, well, that's
And
very kind, man. Appreciate it.
I that was definitely my question, is like, where did this stuff come from? Like, who are your biggest records or players that you really checked out that you feel like, not that you like stole your sound from, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you kind of like have to like transcribe and like do your homework, and then you simmer on that shit, and then it turns into you somehow. I'm just curious what that stuff is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it did start off with definite guitar influences. You know, I mean, I
Mm.
started off listening to George Benson was the very first
Oh,
one,
really?
and yeah, which was just by chance of my parents having a George Benson LP on vinyl. You know,
Mm.
Breezin', which of course
Dude,
is
he
a
has so many fucking records. That's like every time
yeah.
I go to a record store, like now I see at least 3 or 4 of his records in the used jazz section. And it's like, man, I've
Hmm.
never. And it's like every time I need to like do some homework on him. What were like your big Benson records?
Well, my big Benson records definitely Breezin', which is certainly in the sort of R&B mid '70s vein, but that's just some of his greatest playing. You know, I mean, obviously in the '60s and immediately before that, he had a lot of straight ahead jazz
Mm-hmm.
stuff. You know, um, the George Benson Cookbook was a big one for me,
I've
which
never
has
heard
sort
of
of
one.
gone to 19, you know, I think 64, 65, you know, mid '60s. Uh, I have to double check that. But anyway, yeah, I
Sure.
loved the George Benson Cookbook. Um,
Mm.
Beyond that, I also love his more pop oriented albums of the 80s, man. So many great
Mm.
songs. And you've got things like the album In Your Eyes from '83, which has basically got a whole all star cast of New York and Los Angeles session people backing up George. And then he takes some solos, and it's just beautiful, you know.
Yeah,
So
right on.
I'll take any decade of George Benson. But
Hmm.
anyway,
That's good to know,
Reason,
man. It's kind of like
yeah,
intimidating, so that's good to know for me at least. Where it's like just dive into anything and I'll be good.
he's you. That's how I feel. You can just go into anything you like. So basically, out of those 3 decades, the '60s and the '70s and '80s, I listened to a lot of those George Benson albums, and he's got more beyond that. But
Hmm.
I had George as my first sort of guitar influence that I ever heard,
That's cool.
and then I heard Andy Summers and also Jeff Beck right around the same time, and I was about 9 years
Mm.
old then. And just again by chance, I wasn't seeking it out. You know, when I was 9
Yeah.
in 1999, the internet was not as vast a thing as it
Yeah,
is
true.
now. So this was just me going through cassette tapes that belonged to my parents and
Hmm.
vinyl and stuff, you know.
Yeah, right on.
And happened to hear these guitarists who I later figured out were Andy Summers and Jeff Beck on different recordings, you know. So
Sure.
between George Benson and those two guys, you know, that was sort of my vision of what the guitar could sound like.
Yeah, right
And
on. That makes a lot of sense, honestly. I mean, the Jeff Beck alone, like, kind of explains a lot of like the Stratisms,
mm,
and then like Benson jazz, he does some crazy shit. Just like if you were to just simmer on those two, that's like pretty smoky jazz guitar and rock and roll. So that's a nice mixture, man.
it probably makes sense how everything panned out in the end, you know, I sort
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
in terms of the way that I like to play, you know,
Mhm.
between those three influences, I think it's, yeah, sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah, right
looking
on.
back on it. But then later on, I sort of, within a couple of years after that, I heard Pat Metheny, and that was sort of the biggest light bulb moment, if you will, that I was like, well, no, this is absolutely what I have to try and do with my life now.
Mhm.
So hearing
He's
Pat
another dude
was,
who has like a crazy discography. He
yeah,
has so many things. But I gotta
absolutely.
dive more deep. I could say, you know, Bright Side's Life was badass for me. But
Yeah.
and then I remember just checking out that like orchestrion thing because I went, you know, still am going through a phase of like trying to play everything, and that was just like maybe one of the earlier things of like the solo instrumental kind of like someone playing everything. I don't know if there's other examples of that. I might be talking out my ass, but like you
No,
know what
the
I'm saying.
Orchestrion album was a great album,
Yeah,
and
it's
I was
weird. It's cool.
very impressed with that. I genuinely didn't know what to expect. I think,
Hmm.
but should you know what to expect going into someone's new album? Probably not. It's probably
Yeah, yeah. Word.
good
That's a good
to,
point. I don't in general I struggle with words and always, but especially when putting them to like music, like describing music with words is so hard for me. It shouldn't be, but it's really hard to like pin. I feel like you just pin yourself in a box if you're like, well, it's jazz, but it's like world music, and then people are like, oh, so that's like, you know, Indian or African, and you're just like, no, you know, there's always gray areas of kind of like describing it. And then I feel like a lot of people use analogies like it's like, oh, your voice is like maple syrup or something. You're like, what does that mean, you know?
Yeah.
But it's so hard. And he's one for sure that is like really hard to put into categories because he has so many different eras and he plays with so many different people, but he still somehow sounds like Pat, which is really cool.
He does. Pat will always be identifiable in any situation, even if he
Mm-hmm.
switches between the sort of signature instruments that he's known for, whether it be the guitar synthesizer, the Roland, or the just his sort of the arch top that he's best known for. I know he's
Sure.
played a Gibson and an Ibanez at different times, but
Mm.
no matter what the instrument is, well, maybe even a baritone guitar, you'll still know it's him. And that
Oh,
notion
yeah.
made a big impact on me in terms of identity. I think he spoke so highly of Wes Montgomery in interviews, of being his biggest influence. I thought, wow,
Mm.
Pat
You can hear
doesn't
that now
really.
that you say that. I really think about that, especially with his octave thing and like his tone.
You can, when you really look into it, you can see that there's this melodic development in Wes's playing
Mm.
that Pat was probably influenced by it. But then I thought, well, Pat has so much so his own thing.
Sure.
It's like, out of respect for Wes, why would he want to copy that? And I thought, well, in turn, just because I love Pat Metheny or any of these other musicians, I shouldn't copy them either. I should come up with my own thing. So people are usually surprised when I tell them that Pat is probably my biggest guitar influence. But I didn't want to copy him or anyone else out of respect. Really, why would
Mm.
I do that? Why would I copy them? I think they already exist, or they have a recorded history. Why not look to that?
Yeah, man. I definitely agree with that. I would say it's like a blessing and a curse that
Yeah.
you just inevitably sound like yourself. Not like you in general, but like anyone.
No, you can't escape it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of the thing that's interesting is like, you know, I talk to a lot of people and you know, they're like, oh, I want to, you know, sound like Nate Smith on the drums or Mark Juliano, or I want to be like Tim Miller, or I want to be like so and so, or you know what I'm saying? Like the list goes on and on of like who people try to sound like, but
Yeah.
I realized, you know, a long time ago that I wasn't, you know, gonna be able to just shred it like 250, you know, and just fucking kill it. I realized that wasn't my thing. I realized, you know, I wasn't gonna be the best guitar player, but I like being creative and I like writing songs and I like playing. And you know, I learned that like I'm not a great reader, although I still try to read Bach every day, but I've been reading since I was like, I don't know, a little kid, dude, and I still suck at it. So it's just like, you know, I don't know. It's not that I'm not like practicing it, but it's hard. But you know, now I'm like at a point where it's like, okay, I'm almost 30. I think just gonna read for like 15 minutes a day and just like try to learn everything else by ear. Like, you know.
The beauty of it is how open music is.
Mm,
It's
true that.
really, we're told sort of coming up through music education, and there's not
Mm-hmm.
saying this is inherently wrong, but we are told to sort of be a certain type of player, or
Oh,
come up
dude. Yeah, yeah. Well
through a
said.
jazz program or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm not saying that's inherently wrong.
No, but
I
not
get
everything's like straight ahead, if you're talking jazz.
no, and I went to New England Conservatory in Boston for 2 years, which was just uh, one of the best experiences of my life. And I sort of the thing I loved about that experience was that it was a very straight ahead jazz program. But
Mm-hmm.
one of my main teachers was Jason Moran, the great pianist,
Mm.
and Jason, in my private lessons with him, uh, would challenge me. He'd say, "Well, yeah, okay, that's great. You can play straight ahead, but what do you sound like?"
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Play me the song in your heart,
Yeah, it's like, okay, that's great. You can play that, but how would you really play it? How would you play
Mm.
it? I
Yeah,
know
that's
that he
deep.
was sort of getting to the bottom of it, that I was sort of trying to fit into a mold. And I thought that within the framework of a music education program, that's absolutely the best that I could have asked for. And
Sure.
then it was so real world.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
That's
and
hard to find.
Jason,
I'll say
it is
that.
hard. It is hard to find. So I'm certainly not speaking badly of music education as this one thing to speak badly about. But it's
No,
just
no,
like,
but I think just in general, people get caught up on just trying to sound like other people. And I think sooner you're
yeah,
trying to sound like yourself, you try to sound like yourself, you will just do cooler things. I'm not saying like don't
yeah,
transcribe, I'm not saying don't learn new songs. I'm not saying don't quote people or whatever. I don't know. Like you could do that, sure, but like you still don't have to like you're saying, like rip them off, I guess, or steal from them. Like there's a difference between like studying and then like ripping people off.
well, yeah, and as well, just we all have the capacity to have individual and original thought. We
Hmm.
just have to push ourselves to get to that point. We have
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
I think a lot of us don't get to the point of having individual thought and originality because we don't want to feel uncomfortable. I
Mm,
think you've got to feel kind of uncomfortable because you don't know
true.
what's going to come next. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
we sort of rely on predictability in our lives and schedules and
Hmm.
and
Dude,
you know you know
I'm guilty of that.
we all are, it's a human thing, we're all
Yeah.
guilty of it, but in terms of creativity, I think predictability is a bit of an enemy,
Mm,
and I
yeah,
think
yeah,
we've,
no
we've
doubt. You got to
got
stay
to
on your
push ourselves.
toes, I guess, or something.
Yeah, we've just got to, I think you to be truly creative, you've got to make yourself feel a little uncomfortable, and you've
Mm,
also got to be willing to fail.
yeah, yeah, true,
We're
true.
all going to fail, it's inevitable, so you
Dude,
might as well get to it sooner.
true that. That's I mean, I've been learning some hard music lessons lately. It's
Mhm.
I had this I recorded a live album that was like its own like thing: cello, saxophone, two guitars, drum set, 5-string bass, and
Mhm.
vocals. And it was
Yeah,
like
wow.
it was a lot of work, dude. And then I got the session back, and it was just like a disaster. I don't know like what happened, or if it was me. Like it sounded, it is like the takes were okay, but it just didn't sound as like good as it did in the headphones. So now it's gonna like take forever to like go mix it and like blah blah. But it's turned into like a big labor of love when I thought it was gonna be like 4 or 5 days. But I'm like, whatever. But I got my homie on it, mixing it, extracting it, deciphering it, I guess, decoding it. And
Yeah.
I think it'll turn out good. But
But that's fantastic, man. I love that stuff. It's
mm.
painful at the time.
Yeah,
Believe
yeah.
me, I know I've been there, but I think it's like this. That's where you really learn.
Mm-hmm. No, dude, yeah, I learned so many lessons. Like
Yeah.
just too many to even start rambling about, but it's like, when you fuck up, dude, like you definitely learn some lessons. You're like, oh man, maybe I should have taken the time to do this not live, and maybe I should have tracked everything out, and maybe, I don't know, maybe trying to like go the I don't know, second hand or like shortcut way wasn't necessarily the right way. Like I was thinking that maybe the quick and dirty would just like be fun and cool, but it actually turned out to be like way more stressful. And
Yeah.
that was an interesting lesson for me, where I was like, well, maybe not everything is just for funsies. Maybe you got to take some shit really seriously. And you know, like recording your album with video is like one of those things. If you want to like actually do it good and right, like you got to take some time. And I was like, man, well, on
Yep.
to the next one, you know. And
Well, yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
I'm putting it out. I don't believe in, you know, in not putting out a record or something unless it's like total garbage, you know. I don't know. But if it's, I think people just get so caught up in like spending like years on records and stuff, and it's like I've been learning a lot of Beatles and Zeppelin lately, and like, dude, like each one of those motherfuckers have like 200 songs, and like they're not perfect. They're not in time. They're not like on the grid. They're not fucking in. They're not in tune. Like so much of that Jimmy Page stuff is just like, oh my god, like you can't even play along. But I don't know. That's his business, I guess. But they put it out, you know. It's like the piano isn't in tune, or the vocals are just fucking whack, or there's some wank guitar parts, and you're just like, oh, but it's a different time. But they still like somehow became some of the more like famous names, and I think that they just did that by like, I don't think they didn't give like a fuck, but I think that they just like realized that like the more they put stuff out, that the more they'd become known, I guess, rather than just like harboring like these like diamonds and then like
Well,
selling them for millions.
it's interesting because I think that guys like Jimmy Page back then were forging new ground in a sense.
True.
You know,
Yeah, they were the first. They were the first. I've concluded
well,
that too.
they were sort of very much influenced by a lot of the largely American blues players that were being heard in England.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and I guess the best way I can put it is that this young generation of British guys between Page and Beck and Clapton and
Mm-hmm.
all those guys were just sort of putting their British spin on it somehow,
Yeah.
and coming up with this new stuff that was individual to them and their
Mm-hmm.
generation and that moment in society and in
True that.
London in the
Yeah,
mid
that's what I
60s.
would say recordings are in general. It's just a moment in time.
Yeah, and it captures that moment in that
Yeah.
society, and those recordings are so special and so hugely influential. And I think it's you've got all these interesting sort of offshoots of bands that where people were crossing paths, whether it be like John McVie, who eventually formed Fleetwood Mac, and
Mm-hmm.
Eric
Sure.
Clapton crossing paths, and I think it was John Mayall's band, all this stuff in England in the mid 60s that's sort of, maybe it's a little rough on some recorded instances, but it's like
True.
they're just going for it and trying it.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe that's what we need more of now. Maybe that's what they had right
I
in the
think so.
60s
I
within the
think it's like
limitation of
I heard this
recording.
interesting analogy about like a funnel. Like you have to like put like a lot into a funnel to like get it to come out. Maybe
Yeah.
you write 100 songs, but only like one of them gets you anything. But that
Sure.
one song might actually make it on like a Honda commercial or something. I don't know, like the potential of
You
greatness.
never know.
But it's hard to really like get that far if you only released like 3 songs that year or something, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Because I think like, dude, like, someone like you, or I don't know, like take like John Coltrane or somebody who's like amazing. Like you just touch the instrument, it's going to be okay. Like, it's like just you on that day. And that's what I think people are interested in, not like you making Mona Lisa or something.
Yeah. Well, look, man, I think that you don't know. How do I say this? It's hard to know what you're making at the time that you are making it.
That's a super good point.
Probably
That's a super good
better
point.
way to say that. But, maybe an album that you make doesn't catch on for 10 or 20 years, maybe 50 years. I hate to say it.
Mm-hmm.
After it was made, what if it doesn't catch on right away? I mean, you just don't know these things.
That's heavy. That's heavy to think about. Just the unknown potential.
Yeah, I mean, the people who are your biggest fans might not be on this earth yet. It's unknowable. I mean,
That's crazy.
Think about
That's really crazy to think about, dude. Whoa.
Yeah, man. Weather Report was such an
Mm.
influential
Hell
group
yeah.
to
They're
me.
badass. They're fucking
Yeah,
badass.
I
All their
mean,
variations and lineups and musicians, like I don't know like every single one of their songs. I listen to quite a few of their records, but they're sick. Innovators.
Yeah, man, Mysterious Travel was such a big deal for me, that
Mm.
album and all of those ones, especially when Jocko joined on Black Market in
Mm-hmm.
'76, obviously a huge world-changing moment in
Dude, yeah,
music.
seriously.
But all of that stuff, I mean, the mid '70s is 15 years before I was born.
Mm.
you know,
Yeah, true.
which not to say that I have anything to do with Weather Report, but just purely in my capacity as a listener, I I wasn't born when that stuff came out, and yet it changed my life by the time I was a teenager in the mid 2000s, 30 years after it was released.
Sure.
So
That's wild. That's pretty wild.
it's just funny how these things happen, and certainly if you are impacted by classical music, then we're talking
Mm.
about spans of potentially 100 or more years. So,
Yeah, true that. True that. I've been like Bach, I guess, is probably the greatest example of that. Like, what the hell
Yeah.
am I doing reading him like whatever, how many years later? That's kind of
Oh
crazy.
man, I mean, I
Not
learned.
that I have no business, but it's still crazy that it like his lineage made it that far to my desk, like in 2020.
Oh, well, it's also just something like sonatas and partitas
Mm.
for the violin just fits so
Mm-hmm.
beautifully on the guitar,
True. True.
And it's just for me. I've played through that book many times,
Mm-hmm.
not to concert performance standard, but just for
Yeah.
myself and for
Sure. Sure.
reading. And
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played it in front of anybody, but yeah,
no,
just for funsies. But
I've
yeah,
never done it.
what have you been working on just in general? Like, what does a typical practice session look like for you?
Oh man, I divide it up into usually about 5 or 6 sections,
Okay,
and
I agree with that. I tell my kids that too.
yeah, I try to divide it up into sections, and
Mm-hmm.
first off, I try to be brutally honest with myself about what I need to work on. I think it's easy to start practicing the things you already know and start thinking, yeah, it's great,
True that.
which is good. We do need to give ourselves a pat on the back from time to time, but we also need to be honest with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in mind,
Yeah, what are your 5 or 6 things that you would say you're working on right now?
yeah, first section is warm up, and for warm up, I always play arpeggios in 12 keys.
Mm. I do the same thing actually. Interesting.
Yeah, I just pick a type of arpeggios like major 7,
No word.
and I play them in 12 keys, and I start off really slow, like quarter
Okay.
notes at 90.
Right on.
And which is very slow, and it's sort of, you want to get playing, but I have to discipline myself to be very slow because I need to get in the right mindset, the right headspace rather.
Word.
And
Well said.
yeah, it's just warming up is the moment where you have to get into a meditative space to ensure that you're actually going to get some work done.
Sure.
We have so many distractions. We have the phone.
Yeah, dude.
We have a million notifications. It's not to say that the phone is an inherently negative thing. It's just that when I was first getting into practicing a whole bunch, like over a decade ago, phones, flipped open, and they didn't do much.
Yeah, dude. I didn't get an iPhone till like 2016 or something.
Yeah.
And the only thing I'm saying about the phone thing is like I wouldn't even have one if it didn't get me so many gigs. And it's like I wish that there was some other way to get gigs that didn't require social media or like using your phone number. But I don't think that exists.
It's an occupational necessity. Yeah, exactly. It's an occupational necessity.
Yeah. But yeah, man, anyways, continue.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I mean, you've got to, for me, warming up, it's about warming up the hands and making sure that the muscles are stretched out and taken care of. But it's just as much, if not more, about warming up the mind, so to speak. Because if you're not in a good headspace to get work done, you've got a wasted day on your hands potentially.
Oh wow!
So you need to be focused. So I start off with quarter notes at 90 BPM, usually with my eyes closed,
Hmm.
just because it works for me. It doesn't mean it would work for everyone, but it
It's
means
hard,
that
man.
I can block everything out and get practicing.
Right on.
And that usually takes about 45 minutes to an hour. I usually
Hmm.
pick two types of arpeggios, like a major 7 and a
Shit.
minor 7 flat 5 or something, and just make
Sure.
sure that I know that stuff. I mean, I've practiced it for many years now, but people talk about that stuff like, oh, it's the basics. I mean,
Yeah, it's still pretty hard. Yeah,
it's pretty hard, and it is the foundation of what we do. You know, you got to
I agree.
constantly maintain it. It may be basic, but it is the, you know, you got to put oil in your car, so to speak. You
Yeah,
know, you
yeah.
can't
Well,
just stop doing that.
and your playing, I feel like, is so, like linear and arpeggio based, where it's like I could see like why you actually want to work on that stuff. And in general, like I feel like, so many of these players try to go for like this like out sound or playing like these whack notes or just, trying to sound hip or cool or something, but it's like, have you like, can you just play the like what's written though and like try to make that sound good? And like a
Yeah,
lot of people can't do that though, and that's kind of like interesting. Is it's like, sure, like can you just like follow the rules,
yeah,
and still make that sound cool?
yeah.
And that's like its own thing, I think, for me, where especially like I'm in Colorado, and it's like I went to school for jazz guitar and regular music, and I studied like for, I don't know, like almost 7 years or something. And it's like I was in like a bunch of different academic environments: Austin, Dallas, Denton. I went to Boston and Berkeley for a little bit, and just like I saw some shit. And then I'm now living in Fort Collins, and it's like a totally different music scene here. Not that
Mm.
people aren't good, but it's like more that like singer songwriter stuff.
Hmm.
And that definitely wasn't like really in my wheelhouse. And it's like that's that's like a whole different thing. But like in those senses, it sounds sometimes really weird to like kind of like play like some Coltrane or something, or
Yeah.
try to alter their lines, or what I'm saying. But like where that, I think the goodness of what you're saying is just like do the arpeggios, because then you could just play over like any tune. I mean, I argue that like, I don't know if there's really anything else you really need to play a tune. I'm not going to say you sound like amazing, but if you were to know like major and minor scales, and then like the 5 chord types: major, minor, dominant 7, diminished, augmented, and you could like survive almost any musical situation. You wouldn't be like the best, but that's all I could say about it.
Yeah, fair. I mean, look, I think it's just important stuff, you know. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
the funny thing is, you can take it or leave it. I mean,
True.
it goes back to what we're talking about, or what we were talking about earlier.
Take it or
With,
leave it.
yeah, well, you know, like the type of music that you endeavor to play. You know, what do you sound like?
Yeah, true.
Some people claim that they don't know any music theory and they don't want to know any music theory, and somehow seem to convey their identity and their musical statement, their
Mm-hmm.
artistic statement, uh, sonically. And I don't understand that. That's not my thing. I
So, yeah,
think
same. I
I've
know what you're talking about
become,
though. I've met many of them.
yeah, I've become,
Some of
uh,
them sound really good, but there's also some of them that sound really bad at the same time too.
yeah, I mean, I've become so much better in my life since I investigated music theory and reading, and I certainly am an
Mm-hmm.
advocate
Same.
of all that stuff.
Yeah.
But if one person comes to me and claims that they don't know any of this stuff, and they just blow me away with their artistic statement, their musical statement, then I'm not going to question it. If that's your vibe, that's cool. You know,
True.
I
True.
just. But what I will say is that I think that learning all that stuff can't hurt. I
Mm-hmm.
think the idea that it would hurt you, that it would make you
Yeah, I've heard
inherently
that
less
too.
creative.
I've heard that.
I
I don't like that.
think, yeah, if it would make you less creative to learn some basic theory and learn how to read, I think that's rubbish.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah. Right
agree with
on.
that. But at the same time, I'm not gonna doubt you. I think it's wrong to doubt someone's artistic vision,
Mm.
if they really have something to say that comes through in a coherent and meaningful way. I'm not going to doubt someone.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know
dude.
what I
Right on.
mean.
No, I agree. Uh, to name drop somebody that like I would have thought was like a theory wizard, Mark Lettieri. Like I remember taking a lesson from him, and you know he was like said like an enharmonic of some scale. I don't remember the situation, but it was like, you know, it was like it's so, you know, an example in the key of E major, maybe he said like A flat instead of G sharp or something like that. And it's like my theory brain is like, this is wrong. Like he's not speaking the right notes or whatever. It's like that dude could play his ass off. It doesn't really matter like what he calls the note, or like if he doesn't know like what chord he's playing, or like, you know, if he can still like show you and articulate it and like, you know, speak, like teach it to you. That's like an entirely different thing. It's crazy.
Well, Mark is such a wonderful guitarist, man. And
True. And human, nice dude.
I'm sure I actually haven't met Mark in person, but I think what you just mentioned there, you know, about like an enharmonic note name or something, past a certain point that just doesn't bother me, because I'm like, man, I've listened to Mark's records, I've heard his playing in the context of other people's albums too. And I was very much late to the game in finding out about Mark. Sorry to say, you know, I only found out about him.
We grew up in like the same area. That's like, I think the only reason I know about him is like I could go see him every Tuesday. You know, it wasn't like you know, he used to play at the Kitchen in Dallas like every Tuesday, and he, you know, had all these other residencies like years before that. So he was like kind of like a household name in that area. But other than that, like I wouldn't have known about him. So
yeah, well, I had unknowingly heard him on a bunch of recordings going back to probably 2012, but I didn't know it was him.
Right
and
on.
Then probably 2 years ago, I was like, wow, this guy's great, you know.
Yeah.
And it's an example to me of like, however he views those notes, good, it works for him.
Totally, yeah.
Really working great for him. So that's cool. And
hell yeah.
Yeah, such a wonderful guitar player. So there you go. If that's how someone views the theory in order to get their musical statement across, I'm not going to question it. I think whatever.
Yeah, and that's like the lessons, I guess, really for me is it was just like, oh man, like I don't know why the fuck I'm so concerned about this shit. You know, it's good to know, but like I should really be doing what you're saying, like practicing, like just play the fucking guitar, like work on your arpeggios, like, you know, read some music, write some tunes, like learn these records. Like that was pretty much what he was telling me. Just like, you know,
yeah,
not like
I mean,
the
it's
notes
kind of like
really
if you want to play great, this is just a note to myself, you know, not directed at you or anyone. It's just like, this is how I think of it. If you want to play great, just play. You got to play a lot of guitar.
True,
you know, you got to have the instrument in your hands for many, many hours a day. And at my best, I had a practice guitar for 10 hours a day, which I then found out that as you get a bit older, life changes a bit and you have other responsibilities, and that becomes not possible.
True.
But I'm glad I did it for a long time when I was a teenager and stuff. And
yeah, that's cool you say that. I agree with that too. I was in a similar situation where I just like had a lot of time when I was younger, and it was like super helpful. You know, I had guitar in high school as like a class I was able to take, and I was able to play like every day for like 4 years, which is ridiculous. You know, and then as a young child having like teachers and all this, you know, all this other shit, I didn't really think of it. And then, you know, once I got out of college, I was like, oh fuck, you know, I'm like finding practice times are pretty hard, but I was like, oh, well, at least thank God I spent, you know, like you're saying, like sometimes 10 hours a day, just like with the guitar in my hand, which is crazy. But I think a lot of people I talk to at least say that there's at least some period in their life where they just fucking dug so deep, like as much as they could, as anyone can. I guess sure it's different for everyone, but like just taking that time, like you're saying, just to be able to play the fucking guitar, because that's like its own journey.
Yeah, I was a little obsessive about it. I mean, I did back in those days when I was a teenager, I did have a guitar teaching job. That was my first job, you know, at a little guitar store in a suburb in Melbourne, Australia called Elstonwick. Well, it was kind of between two suburbs, Elstonwick and Caulfield. But anyway, you know, it was a little guitar store, and actually, man, I loved those days. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I had a bunch of really cool students, ranging from very young to, you know, people in their 70s, really.
Yeah, dude. And five to 60s, that's what I would say.
That's about right, exactly. And I actually, you know, I look back upon those days with great fondness, man, and it was super cool.
Mm-hmm.
I would I had practice in the morning. I'd go to school. I'd practice a
Mm-hmm.
little more sometime in the day. I'd do my teaching job,
Yeah.
usually starting at 4 p.m. and any time uh, where there's maybe a 30-minute gap or an hour gap between students sometimes. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's some more practice time.
Yeah.
I'd
Word.
usually be done teaching between 8 and 9 p.m. and then I'd go
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
eat dinner and do some more practice till midnight. Or I
Mm-hmm.
think I think my parents said I was a little nuts, but maybe I was. But it
Yeah.
was it
Yeah.
was it was very
Same, man.
productive and I loved it.
Same. Yeah. It's I haven't done the teaching thing for a while. I kind of got burned out, and I don't know. I was playing too many gigs, and it was like just like really hard to be able to like take every gig that I wanted to take when I don't know. It's like especially around here, I play like brewery gigs at like 2 o'clock sometimes. And it's like I'd rather like perform for like $200 or $300 than like teach a lesson personally. But
Fair enough. Yeah.
I personally, that's just how I feel. So many people love teaching, but it's just like for me, like in that particular situation, when you just teach happy birthday all day long and then you like have to go play a gig and then you're like, fuck, like that's like its own like digging deep of like inspiration to like just not like sound like a 4-year-old or whatever, because you're like, that's like all you've been around.
That's
But
funny. I
like
never
what
thought
I,
of that.
I would personally, what I prefer is like doing the online lessons, teaching in-person lessons, and like finding
Mm-hmm.
people that like hit me up or like give a fuck, like come up to me after a show or like hit me up online and are like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I would love to study with you. And like those people are generally like more bucket filling to me than like, doing whatever. But I don't know how I'm still surviving off just playing gigs even post COVID, but it's just like I don't know any other way. I've just like have been doing that, but it's like it's interesting. It's like the
Yeah,
life, dude. But
it's a
I
strange
uh, I like
time,
I like
man.
teaching lessons. Not to talk shit on that, but I like teaching older people. Maybe that's a better way to say it. I like teaching people like our age. That's
Do you,
cool.
do you know something I feel about teaching that goes back to when I was a teenager and I had my first teaching job, and it ends up being the same feeling now. I'm 30 now.
Hmm.
It's like I could be teaching, and this is just for me. I could be teaching uh, someone very young happy birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And them sitting there with their parent in the room trying to work
Mm-hmm.
out how do we play this on the guitar. And on the one hand that can be excruciating, but when you see someone get it and the
Mm.
light bulb comes on, that to me is the moment that makes me think, wow, this is actually pretty cool. There's nothing like this. There's this
Sure.
moment where I've somehow imparted knowledge to someone,
Mm-hmm.
and they might even remember it for the rest of their life. That's pretty
True.
cool.
True.
And
True.
it could be, I don't really teach young kids anymore. I don't teach beginners of any age.
Yeah.
Um,
Right on.
but I did back then.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, if I am teaching, it's,
That's cool
you
that
know,
you say that because I feel myself like I'm personally just judging myself for that, where it's like I just don't like taking beginners. And I feel like that's such a shitty thing to say, but like no, I feel like if you're cool with that, like I guess you're saying that you're like I typically don't, but
no, it's just, and the reason I say it is because I'm not best suited to teach
I
beginners
agree
at
with
this
that.
point. I,
That's exactly what I say. I don't think that I'm the best person to teach your 5-year-old personally, but
I just think I'm at a different stage in my life. When you're a teenager and you've got your first job, and
true, true,
you've got your own money coming in for the first time in your
hmm
life, and it's like, oh wow, I
true,
can
true. Well
quit
said.
your
No, that's a really good perspective. I
well,
don't feel like bitter about it, I guess.
it's a big deal when you get your first job and you're a
That's
teenager and
true.
you've got your
That's true.
own money to your name, and you've got a, it's, you might have
Yeah,
a,
that's and then like the making money off of playing guitar, like those two things together, you're just like,
well, yeah,
like
when you're that age and you're
mind blown.
starting out.
Yeah,
This was a case for me. It's like, wow, this
right on.
guitar can equal money. That's
Mm,
pretty, in
true,
one
true.
some way, shape, or form. And
Mm.
uh, I'm all,
That's a good point. Maybe that's why I'm like that. Maybe it's like because that's a big thing, at least for me, right now, especially where it's like I just spend like forever trying to get gigs, and you know that's like its own bullshit now. But it's like
Mm.
so many people, the market has kind of flipped to where it's like, you know, oh, just come play for free or for tips. And like, to me, that's just like devaluing music. And maybe that's because like you're saying, where it's like, well, my first actual job, I was a guitar teacher. And like,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of fucking sense to me now, where it's like, well, just my mind is just set to this point where it's just like, no, guitar equals money.
Yeah.
And that's kind of interesting. And not to like get on that topic because that's some bullshit, but it's just like that I've never like made that connection before in my own mind. Like maybe that's actually why I'm so like, you gotta get paid, is because that was my first job. But
Yeah, I mean, I think
interesting.
it's a different musical landscape these days.
True that, dude. I'm learning that.
And not just because of the current pandemic that has swept the world. I mean, it's like it's been the last
Mm-hmm.
decade of the music business is sort
True.
of it's unprecedented. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
we're the first generation that has had to deal with this from the get-go. You know,
That's a good point.
we
Yeah.
sort of we have had to go into the uncharted territory of like basically there being record labels in the traditional sense with
Mm-hmm.
huge budgets not
Yeah,
being a
yeah,
thing.
word.
And
And we're
not
just
to
like
say,
doing it, I guess.
well, not to say that that was ever easy in the first place. I mean, it's
True.
like to
Different
actually,
game.
it was a different game to get an actual record deal back in the day. You know, I mean, it's, you know, when I say back in the day, I mean as recently as probably 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and many decades before. It wasn't exactly easy. So you know, can't speak on something I didn't live through.
Yeah, yeah,
But
sure.
but what I can speak on is having to have a recording of some sort out there so that people can actually point to, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you do.
True.
Okay. Um, you know,
Necessary.
you got to be published. You
Yeah,
have to, but how are you going to do it? It costs a lot of money to do that. So we're the first
true.
generation that's had to grapple with that. And I think, you know, for example, if someone crowdfunds something successfully,
Mm.
um, you know, they should be proud of that. That's
True, true. Yeah, I feel
that,
like there's kind of like a negative connotation on that, especially now. It's like, yeah, everyone's asking for money, but it's like, nah, dude, like that takes a lot of hard work to like, like to you know, build the courage and like to be honest enough with yourself to be like, I don't have the money to do this. You know, like I'm gonna need
it's
some help. And that's like, okay. You know, I think, and if anything, it's cool because then you have like reassurance that there's a community like fucking backing you and that's like
mm,
interested in what you're doing, and you're like, oh damn, you know, I didn't just do this for nothing. So that's
I just,
my opinion
yeah.
anyways. But
Well, I think with if you crowdfund a record,
hmm.
um, it's which I did do.
Oh,
I
okay.
had
Which one was that?
Ace, my most
Okay,
recent album. I did
cool.
do. I came to the pivotal
Badass.
stage where we were about to master it
Mm-hmm.
and do all the final managerial stuff.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And it uh, look, I won't go into it too much because it's just not the most fun topic. But
Yeah, I feel
recording
you, bro.
budgets are very different today to what they once were.
Oh fuck yeah, dude, it's
Let
crazy.
let's just leave it at that. But
True,
anyway,
true.
the reason I mention this is because, like, okay, I did a Kickstarter
Mm-hmm.
and I got 160 people from all around the world who voluntarily became involved with it, and
Hell yeah.
it's essentially like a pre-order in that sense. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like people pre-ordering it, and to me, that's something that I'm really proud of that we managed to do that. And I say we because it's sort of a collective effort amongst myself and all the people who wanted to be part of it, because
Mm.
that enabled it to get done. And it's a product of the time we live in. You know,
Yeah,
there's no
sure.
escaping it. We can't pretend it's 1975 and I have a $150,000 budget at
Yeah,
my
fuck yeah,
disposal,
dude.
or bigger
I
for
agree
an
with that.
instrumental record.
Yeah, yeah. True, true. No, that's one, like at least the biggest, again, another lesson that I'm learning is it's like this shit is really expensive and you have to be
Yeah.
like, you know, personally for me, I'm really, you know, in this current world we live in, do I just spend, you know, $600, $1,000, $10,000 probably potentially in a studio trying to cut a record, And then like, or do I just like get some nice interfaces? Do I get a microphone? Do I get a nicer camera? Do I get, some functional gear at the crib so then I can record at home? Because that's like another lesson I learned more recently, where it's like, if you're not comfy, then like no one's comfy. And if you're just like at your own crib, you're so comfy. And if you have like decent gear, you could like spend fucking hours on this guitar solo until it's like perfect. Or, you could spend like a week trying to learn how to play the mandolin part or whatever, I don't know, whatever the scenario is, you could like spend your own time. Although I think like the nuance argument is kind of strange, where it's like, do you think really anyone's going to be able to tell that like, there's, I don't know, like glockenspiel in this song or something like that? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? This ting that only happens once at the, the last eighth note of the 7/8 bar or something. It's just, some dumb shit. But I think in this case where I'm learning, where it's like, well, I think I'd rather record at my house and then like send it to someone to get mixed or mastered if I could get the quality that I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, if you you can certainly do that. You can consult with a great audio engineer, and get their advice on what gear to get, and
yeah, dude, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's smart, and get it bit by bit.
Totally.
It's a tough economy these days, so I totally think that's fair. Get it, one bit at a time until you've amassed all the gear that you need. To record, and I think that's a great thing. So, that's the way it appears to be going, and I think that art and music is a product of the time that you live in many ways. And if
true.
the way that we record it ends up being at home primarily, well, there you go. The time you live in always partly dictates the way that music is recorded, the way it sounds, the way it's played. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think it is.
Yeah, right on. What you got anything you've been working on, like music wise?
Nah, man, I got nothing. No, I'm just kidding. I have been working on some stuff.
That's a fine answer though, honestly.
No, I've been writing some stuff. We'll see what happens with it. I still I couldn't tell you that I have anything as yet, because I don't know if I do, but I have a whole bunch of little demos I've been working on, and we'll see if it becomes a record or anything, but hope it does.
That's cool though. I've been like loving the art of the demo lately.
Good.
It's
man,
it goes far, honestly, like at least for like gigs or going to a recording or trying to collaborate with someone. It's just like, here, I have this idea, just like feel the vibe or whatever. That's a lame word to use, but like here's my idea, here's the feel, shoot something back to me, and then I erase whatever my bullshit part was and then put their part on it.
Oh man, I love, for me, I think it's good to have a balance of both, recording at home, but there's also a lot to be said for getting a bunch of musicians in the room and recording.
Oh, dude, yeah, it's irreplaceable.
There's nothing like it, and capturing the energy of that moment, it's hard to do, but that makes it all so much greater when you capture it in that moment. So pretty cool, and my last record, Ace, and came out this time last year, that's mostly live in the studio, and
I saw that. I was like, dude, that's fucking crazy. That blows my mind. I mean, it's just you gotta like sit there and really just get the good take,
Yeah, I mean, which is great, and I just I'm glad to have had that experience, and hope to get to do it again once we can be closer than 6 feet apart.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's just kind of weird right now, where it's like, I don't know if like doing that is even like the right thing right now. It's like it's pretty hard to pull off.
Well, we gotta get through this funny moment in time, and one day we're gonna have the next generation of musicians coming to us and saying, what was 2020 like? Like,
yeah, true.
I saw the walls of my apartment a lot.
Yeah, dude.
Inside a lot,
Yeah, dude. It's I'm super fortunate to be in Colorado. I just like go to the mountains I live like a block away from the mountains, which is really crazy. I don't know how that I somehow manifested that.
That's great,
And
man. Good. Very good for mental
dude,
health,
yeah,
which is
that's
another
that's
thing.
something like I learned for sure. Like, in the self-employed life, which is kind of interesting. Like, I just feel not that I was like made for this or whatever, but it's like I was used to not being on a schedule. I was used to not having to go to work. I was used to like, I don't know, just having to be inside and like sitting on your ass on the computer all day and like sending emails or teaching Skype lessons or, writing out charts or practicing or whatever you're doing. And then, maybe here you have to drive a lot. So you spend 3 or 4 hours in the car and then you play a 3 or 4 hour gig and then you go home and do the same thing. And it's just like, but like I learned early that like you get into a cycle of not exercising and not going outside and not like just like taking care of yourself, dude. That's
Yeah.
it's a dark place.
You
There's a lot
gotta,
to be said about like taking care of yourself.
you do have to take care of yourself. And I think that's for this very strange time we live in with this illness going around and so on. I think it's very easy to get into a bad headspace. And I
Do
think
that.
that, if one is fortunate enough to have a roof over their head
Mm-hmm.
and food on the table in a time like this, then
Yeah, that's the thanks.
that's something to be thankful for. And I think it's a good time to search within ourselves and try and find some sort of peace, during this time. I think it's hard to do. I don't entirely have the answer to it yet, but I'm working on
What
it.
that's a good note to end it on, I think. What is like one thing that you can give somebody as like a mental health tidbit?
A mental health, like something to help through this time. Do you mean?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Like, I don't know. I've been like I was saying, just going outside. I've been doing a lot of push-ups and pull-ups lately.
Yeah,
I've been getting
that's
some
great. That I
anxiety and
think
I'm
that
just like just hit the pull-up bar instead. It's a weird like reaction, but it's cool.
I don't think it's weird at all. I think getting the blood flowing
Mm,
through exercise is one of the best ways to deal with anxiety. And I think that as people of the world, we need to you know be more open about anxiety
true.
and the fact that it is so widespread.
True.
Uh,
The bitch.
we're just many of us are better at hiding it than others, but I think we're all
Mm,
affected by it.
well said.
And exercise in this bizarre time we live in is one of the best ways to handle anxiety. And my additional bit of advice would probably be don't be isolated.
Mm,
You have more people who care about your interests than you may be aware of. So
that's true.
don't be afraid to reach out
Yeah,
if
well
you
said.
need to talk to someone. It's very easy to get isolated at this point in time, and I think
Hmm.
it can be a very dangerous place. And don't hesitate to contact someone, even if you're just thinking about them and you just want to have a quick chat, say hi.
Yeah,
I think
true
that
that.
there's
True that. I've been
nothing
doing a
wrong
lot
with
of that
that.
actually. I'm guilty of that. I've been going back to the
Good.
slide thing. I've been trying to like, hit up every fucking slide player I can find. Like anytime I see
Yeah.
somebody's name, pedal steel, lap steel, dobro, whatever, I just like try to stalk them and like send them an email. I just like, dude, please tell me like what kind of gear you're using and like
Yeah.
trying to go down this rabbit hole. And there's just not a lot of homework or like I have to do it myself. And it's like really, I feel like like going back to the 1970s or something is like pre-internet, it's like, just going
That's
around like
cool, man.
asking people, like writing shit down, like where's this homie? Where do I learn about this? And
Yeah.
it's actually like really cool. I haven't
Yeah.
I hope everybody out there like finds that thing that inspires them as much as the slide has for me in this time. Cause
And
it's
that's the
like,
thing. It's a
so
personal journey.
it's just cool. Yeah. It's just cool. But yeah, dude,
Yeah.
thanks so much for fucking talking and hanging. Huge fan. I love like watching your YouTube shit. I hope that's going well.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thank you for checking it out.
Dude,
I'll have some more
badass.
things in the
I
pipeline.
appreciate it as someone who's trying to do the same thing. I'm like, there you go, man. There's somebody that gets the struggle, That's its own thing. I really like the YouTube thing. And I've always been a fan of your Instagram. And
Oh,
yeah,
thanks,
in
man.
general, I always say this, like, send me your Venmo and your, like, anything you want to share, like your website, or if you have like
Mm,
any lesson packages, or I don't know, anything you feel worth sharing, send it to me in our little Facebook chat, and
yeah.
then I'll post it in the comments of the video.
Cool,
But
man. You got it.
yeah, dude,
This
I'll send it
is
to
it's
you when
great.
it's out. I'm going to try to put it out soon. I've been pretty bad about that, but
No
gonna try to get it
worries.
out next week. I'm holding myself to it. You
Yeah,
hold me
man.
to it. Just
Just
for,
let me know.
you know, the good college try, I guess. But thanks for hanging, bro. It was
No
badass. I'm gonna
worries,
get out
man.
of here and go water my plants. But
That's a good thing to do. Well, man, great to talk to you.
yeah,
Thanks
peace,
for having
bro.
me.